Tape Deck Media.
Hi there, I am Kelly Zemnikas, and I am the host of a brand new podcast called Holler and Wine. I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I genuinely love talking to people. And despite the fact that I do not care for the sound of my own voice, I've got a podcast now. So please come join us. We're going to have really good conversations. We're going to talk about cocktails, and I am going to give my guests a tarot card reading because why not? So join us on Holler and Wine. Hope to see you soon. Well, it's a podcast, so it's hear you soon? That sounds weird.
Ruddle me this, ruddle me that. We got the riddles that'll make you chat. Oh yeah, baseline stuff with groove is tight. Get your funk on, we're rocking tonight. One more time.
Hello, Ruddle Maniacs. Welcome back to another episode of Ruddle Me This. I am your faithful host, Taylor Ruddle, and it's been a while. I haven't done a solo episode for a long time, so I thought it might be kind of fun to do that. This is one that I wasn't sure I was going to get the time to create in my schedule sort of leading up to Christmas. But I found myself with several hours to kill before a gig this evening. That is Monday Pun Day. It is a comedy show that we're running at the Crafted Coffee Company, where it is all centered on gags, goofs, one-liners, puns, and everything like that. We've got the first run of it tonight. By the time this drops, we will have done it, and I hope it went well. Hope we got some punters in to enjoy some puns. But if not, we'll give it a try again in the new year, I think. So for today's episode, I wanted to do an episode called Media I Consumed in 2024 and Want to Recommend to You. I'm just going to guess, but if you're a listener of this podcast regularly, you probably have similar tastes to me. And because of that, I think I could recommend you some stuff to watch or listen to or play that you might very much enjoy. So I've got a big list that I've been making throughout the year of just things that I watched or, media that I consumed that I enjoyed. And I'm going to go through it. There's not in any particular order. There's all manner of stuff. There's video games, there's books, there's podcasts, there's movies, TV shows, a little bit of everything in there. I will also post the list of everything in the video description so that if you forget or you want to look it up later, you can do so. Now that I think about it, I might actually make a thread on the subreddit that people can submit things that they would like to recommend for me to watch. We could do a little back and forth there. So the first thing on the list today is a podcast called Sweet Bobby. You're probably familiar with the term catfishing, or the Catfish TV show, and it is a catfishing story. It's not for everyone because it does contain a lot of, psychological abuse and manipulation. And I can imagine if you've been through a similar situation where somebody was manipulating you online, you would not enjoy this one. But for me, and my little ivory tower, thankfully not having been through this situation, it was a really, really compelling podcast. It's basically about a woman who's working as a sort of local music DJ, I think, on like a Desi or like a maybe Indian radio station. And over the course of it's several years, somebody was really slowly manipulating her through using multiple Facebook accounts that were sort of copies of real people that she sort of met and knew tangentially, and she couldn't really tell who was real and who was, being controlled by this catfisher. And, this whole thing, she was in this sort of online relationship with this supposedly a guy called Bobby, who is a real person, but someone had sort of stolen his identity and used him in the catfish. And so she was in a sort of online relationship with this, fake Bobby for years, and the whole podcast goes through the investigation of that. And I hope this isn't a spoiler, but they do actually find out who it was. It's not one of those unsolved ones where they kind of just end it and say, well, we'll never know what happened, because I find those really unsatisfying to listen to. So there is a conclusion. It's honestly probably going to keep going. It seems like it's not finished. Like the real world proceedings are not finished, so there'll probably be more of it. But there's about 6 or 7 episodes, and I really enjoyed it. The next one, and I've talked about this a little bit on the show already, is the concert Right Here, Right Now by the band Ghost. I talked about how, I've done a whole kind of talk about this in another episode. I believe it was at the end of episode 77, Breaking Down the Menu with comedian Jeff Wilson. I talked about why I enjoy this concert so much, but essentially the Ghost band is a band with lore, and they change their frontman, their lead character, every album. And so the thing with Ghost is I've been following them since their 3rd album, their 3rd sort of frontman. And there's kind of, it's almost like a BC AD thing with Ghost where they have these, I guess not canon events as such, but they have these definite points where the band reach new levels of popularity. So the first 2 albums were like in relative obscurity. Then the 3rd album, they had the song Square Hammer pop off, and that kind of launched them into a new level of like fans and followers. And that was roughly when I got on board with them. And then the next character they did was a character called Cardinal Copia. He was the frontman of the band, and he got 2 albums. The first album was when he was learning to be the kind of frontman of the band, and then the second album was sort of his full ascension to being the they do this whole, the frontman of the band is always called Papa Emeritus. The whole band is sort of like a Catholic Church Pope kind of it's a satanic sort of twist on it. The band is not actually like promoting Satanism, that's just the whole storyline. But so what happened was a couple of songs went viral on TikTok through Ghost during Cardinal Copia's run. They were Mary on a Cross, which you've probably heard, and then they had another one. The opening of Year Zero was used a little bit in some TikToks. And so that obviously brought a whole bunch of new young fans. And so it's just cool to see where the band is now. And the Right Here, Right Now was kind of a concert movie. And the whole thing to me felt a bit like a victory lap for the character of Cardinal Copia. Like, I'm assuming he's going to go away in the next album. I think they've announced that there's a new character coming. But yeah, this whole album was just feel good. And it kind of felt like seeing where the band came from and where they are now. So as a fan for like a relatively long time, I haven't been there since the beginning. But yeah, it was a real satisfying sort of conclusion to this arc of Cardinal Copia. Huh. That's a funny pun. Speaking of Ark, my flatmate and I have been watching a show called The Ark, which is a really cool TV show. It is one of those shows where humanity, Earth is fucked, and so they send a bunch of people hibernating in hyperspace. They send a ship off to another planet to try and colonize the planet when they all wake up. But something happens, they get hit with an asteroid or something hits them, and it wakes a bunch of them up early, and it actually destroys the whole pod where all of the leadership people are sleeping. So it's up to the, the mid-level kind of people to rise up and find new command leadership, and they sort of have to figure out what hit them, and then they also have to figure out how to fix their ship to the point where it can get to where they're supposed to get to in order to complete their mission. Now, I'm admittedly not a massive sci-fi fan, but this show has hooked me from the beginning. I'm not quite sure what it was about it. Maybe it's the mystery, the inherent mystery of what actually hit them and woke them up. As you can imagine, there's more to that than meets the eye. I think the characters are really distinct and really well balanced. I think also is the fact that it reminds me a lot of the movie The Martian. What I liked about The Martian was the scene where he's having to grow potatoes on Mars. Like, it was a very sort of realistic, science-y, he's on Mars, but science still works kind of thing. So I think that's what I like about it. It's a bit like halfway between something like Star Trek and something like Firefly. I feel like the intro really doesn't fit. The intro has this kind of like, it feels very Star Trek-y, like heroic music, and it almost feels like it's the kind of propaganda they would have shown to the people before they launched them into space. It's, Starship Troopers-y in that kind of sense. But yes, very, very good show. We are just about finished. Oh no, we just started season 2. And enjoying it immensely. The characters, I think, are the selling point in that. The characters are really well written, and they feel like real people. Next one on the list is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I watched the original old one from the 70s and I wasn't sure what to expect. I'm not a huge fan of slashers. I tend to be more leaning towards zombie movies, ghost stories, sort of supernaturally monsters kind of thing. I like certain slashers. Like I liked Scream a lot. I think that was a really really smart movie. I really like the Friday the 13th ones. Something about the presentation of those, I love it. But yeah, not huge on slashers, but this one was really well made, and I think it was obviously low budget. I felt really bad for the amount of screaming a lot of the actors had to do. It seems like it'd be really exhausting. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen this one, but if you haven't, it does hold up. It's worth watching. It's something is just gross and unsettling about it. They're in the deep south, and it feels all hot and humid, and you can see bugs flying around, and there's sort of blood, and yeah, something about the movie is just yuck. It just sent shivers down your spine in a sort of like unsettling way. And then of course there's the great like villain and you probably know who Leatherface is, the chainsaw wielding guy. Next one we watched, this was one that my flatmate and I made our way through gradually. This was Peaky Blinders, and Peaky Blinders, I really liked the early seasons of it. This is mild spoilers, but when I'm recommending media, people often ask me you kind of ask questions to people like, someone will recommend you a show and they'll be like, you have to get through season 1 and 2 and then it gets really good in 3, or like it's got a really unsatisfying ending. So without spoilers, like the direction of the show moves. So the beginning, they're a little razor gang in Birmingham, and they are trying to get into, what is it, like bookkeeping, or the thing where you bet on horse racing. I think probably they're fixing the races as well, I would imagine. And it's all kind of small time. Thomas Shelby, like the main character, Cillian Murphy plays Thomas Shelby. He's magnetic. I love every scene that he's in. Like, Tommy is kind of the thing that kept me watching the show, even though I wasn't really digging the direction of the later seasons, because they start out small time, and what I liked so much about the show is it seemed to capture this like sort of sadness and melancholy following the war, because one of the things I think soldiers coming back from a big war face is they struggle to reincorporate back into society. So that's why you've got things like Sons of Anarchy. They're following up, I think a lot of them were Vietnam veterans, and they came back to an America that they didn't fit into and didn't recognize. So that's why they started the gang, to try and have try to capture the having structure, but they didn't really want to be in normal society like the rest of everyone else was. And a big theme of the start of Peaky Blinders is how these 3 boys, the Shelby brothers, they went away to war and came back as different men, and they're obviously sadder, and war changes people, right? And a lot of the members of the Blinders in the beginning, they were all previous war veterans as well, and they would quite often, there was this weird sort of brotherhood between the characters who'd served in the war. They just refer to it as going, were you in France? They always just refer to it as going to France. And that's what I really liked about the start of Peaky Blinders, was that it was just these people that were in a rough situation. There's a lot of racism towards the Peaky Blinders because they're all, I don't know what the Romani people, I think gypsy, you're not supposed to call them gypsies anymore, but travellers, I think maybe is the correct term. I apologise if I've gotten all this wrong. We don't really have them in New Zealand. But yeah, there's so much racism towards them for being travellers, as well as the war stuff. And it's just a rough situation. They're just trying to make their best of it. And it's, I don't know, there's just something beautiful about the early seasons of it when things were simpler and it was more about I think it depicts mental health issues in men very well. Like, a lot of these characters have, like, they're alcoholics, or they've got PTSD, or they're getting triggered by things. Like Thomas still has nightmares, even 20 years after the war, because he was a I don't know what his role was called, but they used to dig underneath enemy lines and plant explosives. So he has nightmares about, hearing other, like, if, they're digging around and he hears a sound in one of his walls or something, and he has a nightmare about a guy appearing out of his fireplace or something and trying to kill him, and yeah, very scary, scary stuff. But then as the show moves on and Tommy kind of accumulates power, he gets into being like he's like a member of parliament, and you sort of get into this thing of like, there's a guy trying to start a national socialist movement in England, and he gets involved with big time gangsters running alcohol, and I don't know, the later seasons, I still enjoyed them, but I didn't like them as much as the first few seasons when they were on a smaller scale. I'll definitely watch the movie, though. I'm looking forward to that. Baby Reindeer. This is another one on my list. Baby Reindeer, if you've not seen it, it is a story of a up-and-coming comedian who sort of accidentally... how do you word it? Like, he sort of accidentally made himself visible to a woman that has a serious history of stalking people. And the whole show is really well made because he even admits himself that he kind of liked the attention that he was getting. It was just when it started getting out of hand was when he realized he'd made a mistake by he didn't necessarily invite it, but there was a lot of things he could have done to put a stop to it earlier, and he didn't. It also goes into things like the abuse of power in the entertainment industry. Without spoiling too much, he's sort of taken advantage of by an older man who's a sort of writer or a producer, I think, in, whatever the equivalent of Hollywood is in England. So yeah, it's definitely a hard watch at points. I think the trigger warnings I can give for that are mainly to do with manipulation, sexual assault, and I think that's all I can remember off the top of my head. It's very good. There's an episode where it talks about him going to the Edinburgh Festival, and so me as an upcoming comedian, God, that episode hit home with me as to how rough some of these early shows in your career can be. And the funny thing is, I didn't actually think I was enjoying it that much for the first couple of episodes, but then after a certain point, I was really, really hooked, and sort of jokingly was telling people I wanted more Baby Reindeer. And then the woman that the stalker character was allegedly based off of went on Piers Morgan and gave this like hour and a half long interview where it was very clear that, allegedly this is the woman. If it is, man, he nailed her. He got so many of the mannerisms correct. And so that was kind of my season 2 of Baby Reindeer, was getting to watch the Piers Morgan interview. So yeah, hard watch, at points, confronting, very dark, but really, really just good. It's well made. The Menu, like I mentioned before, Jeff Wilson and I, we talked in depth about the movie The Menu. So if you want to hear us break down this movie and talk about this idea of like the cost of greatness and what does it mean to be great, which this movie deals with a lot, because I feel this movie is sort of, depending on where you are in life, you'll watch it with different eyes. Like us as sort of struggling creatives and trying to be artists, we watch it through the idea of like, it's this sort of, I think it's intentional. They did put all of this in the movie, that it is a sort of critique on the idea of who are you trying to please, who are you trying to please with your art? Is it worth trying to appease the people that you're trying to appease with your art? Is it worth sacrificing everything in your life? Like the characters all live on this island that they cook in, and they're just wholly dedicated to serving this sort of fine dining food. But then on the other hand, if you're looking at it on the surface level, it's actually just this weirdly cozy sort of horror movie where a bunch of people go to a chef's fine dining island, and then, this is not really a spoiler, but he plans on killing them all is the least spoilery way that I can do. And just something about it is very cozy. I think it's the sound effects, the lighting, it's very dark. It's obviously, they're in a restaurant at night, and it's bizarre how sometimes we often find horror movies cozy, and I don't know exactly why, But this is one of those movies that I find quite comforting to watch, even though it's quite horrific at points. It's also really surprisingly funny. Rafe Fiennes, I think you pronounce him. He's incredible. He plays this awesome. He's the head chef character, and he's wonderfully dry and sort of humorless at points. But then he just has these funny one-liners that he delivers. Yeah, there's a weird sort of humor in this character. It's another one of those ones where none of the characters are really that likable. I think the main character, Margot, played by Anna Taylor-Joy, is relatively likable. You want her to kind of survive. But the rest of them are kind of like deliberately a-holes. Okay, next on the list is Django Unchained. Now, I'm guessing you've probably seen this one, but I went through a bit of a Western kick again recently, and Django ended up being one of the ones that I rewatched. I started out by rewatching scenes from the Dollars trilogy, but then I also watched a movie called They Call Me Trinity, which is a spaghetti western, which is also very good. If you're into spaghetti westerns, that's definitely one I think you'd like. Django Unchained, I mean, what more can be... Like, it's Tarantino. He's very, very competent at what he does. I don't know if I need to sell you any more. I think if you're aware of the movie and you haven't watched it, there's maybe a reason for that. But, yeah, I just went back and watched it, and I really liked it. I love Jamie Foxx as Django. I think he's... What's crazy is, like... This movie was the first one I'd seen him in, I think. I'm sure I'd seen him in other stuff, but it was the first one where he was in, like, a lead role, and, like... Django's a kind of humorless character, and I didn't realize how funny Jamie Foxx was until I then looked him up on interviews, and he'd done like Graham Norton and everything, and he's really, really funny, and he's an incredible impressionist. And I didn't really expect this, but there's a bit towards the end where it shows kind of like a flashback of Django doing like the classic quick draw Western thing, and King Schultz just says to him with this kind of tenderness, "Do you know what they're going to call you? The fastest gun in the South." And it just has this has the theme song from Trinity playing in the background, and something about that kind of got me. It tugged on my heartstrings a little bit. Next one on the list is the show Silicon Valley. Now, this is one that my cousin Simon, I don't know if Simon still listens to the podcast. He submitted some really good stories for my Phantom Files episode. So Simon, if you're listening, shout out to you. I finally got around to watching Silicon Valley. Simon and I used to work for Simon. He started up a tech apps company, I guess, in Japan, and I was working sort of part-time for that when I was living over there in Fukuoka. And so I believe, Simon, if you're listening, you were watching it while we were working there. I can't quite remember. Maybe you're rewatching it. But yeah, I finally went back and watched it, and it's basically... What is this? The hook that Simon told me actually was kind of what got me interested in watching the show, is that the main character, he's working for a big company that's essentially like Microsoft or Facebook or that kind of scale in Silicon Valley. And he's trying to create an app that lets you like compare music and see if you've stolen music or something. But while he's doing that, he incidentally creates a super efficient algorithm for compressing stuff. And so they managed to turn that into a company. They call it Pied Piper, and they start their own Silicon Valley sort of company, startup, whatever you call it. And the show is about the trials and tribulations that it takes for them to get this app to market, I guess. I feel like the difference between something like this and Big Bang Theory, like, I do enjoy Big Bang Theory, but the thing about Big Bang Theory is it feels like it's made for normies to kind of laugh at the nerds, whereas Silicon Valley feels more like it's kind of like, it's FUBU, it's for us by us, for nerds by nerds, and that's the main difference, I think, between Big Bang Theory and Silicon Valley. And so this is another one that I watched with my flatmate, and we kind of watched, this was our show for a while, and I really didn't expect to get as attached as I did to the cast of characters. And like, I tell you what, speaking of Big Bang Theory, I feel like Big Bang Theory was one of those shows that nailed their final episode. It's hard to do. Anybody that used to watch How I Met Your Mother will remember how badly they fumbled that last episode. And, there's been heaps of other episodes that have completely fucked up their final episode, but Pied Piper... not Pied Piper, what am I talking about? Silicon Valley nails it. Last couple episodes are incredible. It's a perfect ending for the series. So rest assured, they don't fuck that ending up. Next one is Hamish and Andy. If you're into comedy or radio, that kind of thing, you'll probably be familiar with who Hamish and Andy are. They are these two radio DJs. Their career is kind of interesting because I think historically they were sort of like what you might refer to as like top 40 radio hosts, where they would do a sort of afternoon drive show, but they've lately pivoted. Like, they do a podcast now, and the thing that I love so much about Hamish and Andy that I've been getting back into is like they just have this. I can't even describe how good it is, but they have this idea to take events, just event ideas and stuff, and they make them happen in amazing ways. Like, they did one recently called Con, which was a conference, and I'd been sort of skipping the episodes about it because the idea didn't really appeal to me that much. I thought, conferences, like, I sort of got where they were going for it. I didn't really think it was for me, but then I watched a YouTube video about the whole event, and it looked like it was such a fun event. Like, the three of them gave keynote speeches that were sort of piss-taking. And then they did like the big brunch in the conference room at the hotel, and it was sort of networking mixer kind of event. And actually, I have to say, they really looked like they pulled off the event. They did another one that I really liked, which was they had this series called Upset Andy. And so Hamish and Andy, the two of them, the dynamic is that Andy is very particular. He's not particular. The way they word it is he likes things to be just so. He likes organization. He likes systems. He likes he likes things to be, as they should. Whereas Hamish, they refer to as being half fast and loose. He doesn't have time for organization. Everything's chaos, and that's the kind of the dynamic they have. So they have this segment called Upset Andy, where a listener will call in and say things that they do that upset Andy. Like, one woman called in to say she'll be filling her car up, and she'll just decide at an arbitrary point, I've had enough of that, and she'll stop filling the car up. Like, she doesn't fill up the car completely. Things like a guy said when he stops his car and he turns the engine off, he doesn't wait till the windshield wipers are back to where they're supposed to be. He just lets them sit wherever they are and doesn't reset the position, and that upsets Andy. And they did a segment called Please Andy, and it was like a thing where they flew in people from all over Australia to, like, in person show Andy like organizational things or just stuff that they thought was gonna, like, please him, basically. And so it was things like a snack organizational system where this woman had found all these Tupperware containers that fit perfectly together. Like, they weren't sold as a set, but she'd gone out and done the legwork and found the sets. Another guy did a really quick method to tie your shoes in one kind of go. Another guy showed Andy his perfectly organized Google Drive folders for all of his taxes and stuff like that. And the idea was that after all these years of upsetting Andy, finally it was time to please Andy with some nice stuff. And so just that kind of thing is so cool. I'd love to eventually have the sort of resources and the time and the sort of human power to make Ruddle Me This events like that happen. But gosh, I don't even know where to start. Okay, more on the list. So there's a series called Radio Rental, which is a lot like my Phantom Files. It is set up as a fictional video store where they play, quote-unquote tapes, and they're all just scary stories. The host is played by Rainn Wilson, who I understand was somebody on The Office. I never watched it, but I think he was Dwight on The Office. He plays a character called Terry Carnation, who's sort of an up himself, smug radio. He runs Radio Rental, or he owns it or something, and he does a bit of talking in between playing the stories. It's basically just a vehicle for creepy, scary ghost stories. So, if you like the Phantom Files, if you like creepy, if you like the No Sleep podcast, all the stuff that I bang on about, Monsters Among Us, check out Radio Rental. Next on the list is Creepcast. It's another scary stories podcast. It is done by, what is his solo channel? I think he's called Papa Meat, the fellow behind the Meat Canyon YouTube series, and then also another guy called Wendigoon. They do sort of rereadings of scary stories and old creepypastas. So if you're like me and you kind of came up in the early 2000s using the internet, they'll do these like rereadings and analyses of old creepypastas that maybe you didn't read. Like I always wanted to read but never had the patience to read Ted the Caver, and they went through that, and it was much easier to listen to it than to read it. I think they also add context to certain old ones. Like I was always aware of one called Jeff the Killer, which I think was a sort of more of a tongue-in-cheek. I think people were more making fun of it than anything else, and they added some context to what that was all about. So yeah, very much worth the watch there, Creepcast. Next on the list is Jak and Daxter. This game, man. So there's been a project. I initially played it on the PC. I believe I emulated it. I own the copy of the game, so don't come at me for that. And there's been a project called Open Goal, which the whole thing with Jak and Daxter is like when they programmed the game, they had to make their own programming language. It was called Goal. And the tricky thing about that was the reason they've never been able to make a PC version is because this programming language, I think everyone that worked on it doesn't work in games anymore, or they've moved on to other things. So a team of modders had to learn how Goal worked and then sort of reverse engineer it and get it to work on the PC, and they've done that. And God, this game still holds up so much. Like, the movement in this game is unlike any other platformer I think I've ever played. The way you can do a punch, then you hit jump and he'll go into an uppercut, then you can spin in the air, or you can do like a ground pound, and like just something about the way they've programmed all of Jak's moves is that they flow into each other so perfectly. So you're just this like Tasmanian devil spinning around the levels, and I don't know, something about this is quite funny actually. When I was a kid, I used to find those games with collectibles really stressful because you have to collect all of them, and so I would end up not enjoying the game because I was so preoccupied with trying to explore all of the mission, all of the level space to try and not miss any of these friggin' collectibles. And so Jak and Daxter was you've got to collect these precursor eggs, which are just big bronze eggs floating around. But now that I've played it several times, like I honestly have lost count of how many times I've played through the storyline of this game. It's probably 50 or 60 hours I've maybe spent in this game. I don't even know if that's a lot. I've spent so long playing because it's just such a good chill out game. Like when you're watching a movie and you just want something to occupy your hands, putting on Jak and Daxter for me is perfect because like you get into this flow state of like, by this point I know where everything is, so I'm just kind of like going on autopilot, and it just flows. I often think if I was ever able to get a job working like a machine press or something, I would actually do quite well at that because I seem to be able to reach this sort of meditative state when my hands or body are occupied with a menial task, but not taking up too much of your brain space to where it can still think about other things. And so for that, Jak and Daxter has been very meditative for me. But yeah, if you have a PC, I recommend check out Open Goal if you want to dunk your face back in some nostalgia. Next one on the list is Treasure Island. Well, if you've been following the podcast, you'll know that I recorded an audiobook of Treasure Island for Plains FM here in Christchurch. Good God, what an undertaking doing an audiobook is. I had no idea how big of a task that was going to be when I offered to do it for them. Now that I know, I would, if I had to do it again from the start, it would be a lot smoother, a lot better of a process, but a lot of fun, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed being able to read Treasure Island for the first time. It was one of those books that I always felt like I should have read leading up until this point, but never actually had, so now I get to feel like I'm cultured, and whenever we're watching a pirate thing, I get to point at things and be like, did you know the Hispaniola is actually from Treasure Island? I believe if you go to my podcast feed and search for Treasure Island, you can listen to the first 1 or 2 chapters that I recorded of this book. So if you want to hear me reading it, either go along to Plains FM's website and you can check out their Spin Me a Tale series, or you can go back and search for the first couple in my feed. Rogue Galaxy is the next one on the list, and this is great, fitting in with the Pirates theme. It is a PS2 game that is a spiritual successor to a couple of games called Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicle that I loved more than anything when I was a teenager. The sad thing about Rogue Galaxy is it's a really, really good game, and it's exactly in line with these Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicle. But the problem I feel like with it, the reason it never got the roses that it deserved is because it came out so close to the end of the PS2's life when the PS3 was, I think, maybe already out or just about to come out. So nobody really played it. But yeah, it's an amazing space pirates game with a really colourful cast of characters, real satisfying combat. The weapons are amazing. It's much like the Level 5 games. Level 5 is the studio that develops these games, which actually an old co-worker of mine, Philip, works for Level 5 now, so shout out to Philip. You're probably not listening, but if you are, shout out, brother. And, well, this is a tough one to recommend because I actually still own the PS2 version of it, but if you find yourself with the means to play it, and you like space pirates and long RPGs, then definitely give this one a go. Next one on the list is House of the Dragon. I'll do actually the next two, House of the Dragon and Rings of Power. I'll do them sort of as one item because they sort of like last year, I think I was watching season 1 or maybe 2 years ago. There's some of these things I'm a little confused about whether I watched them last year or this year. But yeah, House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, I feel like collectively we're still reeling from the fact that we didn't really enjoy the ending of Game of Thrones. So I was a little bit hesitant about watching House of the Dragon, but I have to say, I mean, it's all right. Like I think it's good. I like what I've seen of House of the Dragon. I like the fact that we're learning more about how dragons work. The thing, because it's taken from a history book, and this is something interesting that I like that they're doing it, is like the characters grow up and they have children and you go through like several generations of this family, the Targaryen family, like sort of over the course of the series. So it means actors are changing and actors will be in it for like a couple of episodes and then get killed off. Like it's very quick. It feels like it's progressing. Well, that's the thing. Season 2 felt like it was very slow, but season 1 felt like stuff was happening like boom, 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 real quick. So I don't know what season 3 is going to be. I worry that they're going to try and squeeze more seasons out of this than they should. But yes, if you haven't watched it, basically, House of the Dragon is showing us what happened. So let's assume you've watched Game of Thrones and you know who Daenerys is. So I believe House of the Dragon is, gosh, how many years ahead of Game of Thrones is it? I don't think it's 100 years prior, but it's like maybe somewhere in between like 50 and 100 years. And it is the story of, like, if you know medieval history at all, anytime there was a legitimacy or a succession dispute, there was pretty much always a civil war. And so the setup of this series is that the king, he names his, in the first, this is not spoilers, but in the first episode, his wife dies in childbirth and the heir, was supposed to be a male heir. The baby dies as well. So he names his eldest daughter the heir, but that causes some contention because of the times that they're in where, it was always typically the firstborn son that is the new heir. So some people like it, some people are not happy about it. And then he ends up remarrying and has a new son by his second wife, and this new wife was his eldest daughter's sort of best friend, and so as you can imagine, that's very, very messy. And so it's sort of between, they call the war between the Greens and the Blacks. The Greens are Alicent Hightower, which is his daughter's best friend, and his daughter is, God, what is she called? Rhaenyra Targaryen, I think she is. And they all have a lot of kids. So Alicent's son is Aegon. God, there's so many Aegons in Game of Thrones, but he's Aegon Targaryen. He's the king, but he's not really a good king. He's like a lech, and he's sort of cowardly, and he's just not a very good king. But because he's the eldest son, that's what they go with. And so the Civil War sort of, it's technically between Rhaenyra and Aegon, but it's kind of more between Alicent and Rhaenyra.
So that's kind of split there. And people have which side they like, the Greens or the Blacks. I think the showrunners and that, or the promotion people, are trying to get you to you know, oh yeah, you Green or you Black, you know, that kind of thing. But I don't know, I just watch it. I'm just kind of watching to see what happens. I've watched season 2. It was fucking slow, but I'll probably watch season 3. Rings of Power, I've watched season 1 of, and was a little bit like, going into it. Like, I didn't know if I was really that into it, but it actually did really grip me. I remember by the sort of time I was midway through, I was really enjoying it, and I think I've watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes of season 2. That might be one that I watch over Christmas. What do I like about Rings of Power? You know, anything in Tolkien's world is fun. I like seeing other characters that aren't the Fellowship. Like, one of my favourite PS2 games was Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, because it was a bunch of other characters from these, you know, there was a guy from Gondor, there was another elf, there was a dwarf, there's like all these different people from like other parts of Middle-earth. So I kind of like seeing new characters in the setting that I like.
Don't ever read any comments about what people think about this show online. I used to subscribe to the Reddit for it, but it was just so much complaining and bitching and moaning about it, and it's like, just don't fucking watch it then. If you're not enjoying it, don't watch it. There's a billion other things you can watch. And like, there's a whole, I don't know, it's kind of been politicized because they made like, you know, a black elf and the, you know, the main character's a woman, and so there's this kind of, I think there are probably a lot of dudes that don't like it because of that. But they are trying to present, no, I just have problems with the storytelling, it's not told, and you're just like, yeah, okay, dude, like, again, just don't watch it if you don't like it. Like, I can't stand it. It's like, it would be fine if they didn't enjoy it and then just went, that's not for me. Like, you know, I liked the movies, I liked the books, but I'm just not going to watch this, I'm just going to go on. But it's like they feel the need to, like, my opinion is important and people need to know why I'm not, and it's like, fuck off. Like, shh. I forget who I was talking to this about the other day, but the internet and Twitter, everyone has made it seem, everyone thinks that their opinion is important, but it's like, no. Like, we don't care. Like, just either watch it or don't. We don't hear about why. Okay, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, no, the character follows Galadriel, who I actually quite, I don't know, people, again, the criticism, they say she's not, like, you know, oh, she doesn't have a lot of range, but it's like, she's an immortal elf. Like, what? I'm fine with her not emoting like a regular human. Like, the elves are pretty nonchalant anyways, and even in the Peter Jackson movies, I don't remember them showing a ton of emotion. But it's kind of, yeah, it's, what was it, season 1 kind of showed you the origins of Mordor. It seems like it's set it's definitely set before the main, like, Lord of the Rings trilogy. They're doing a whole thing where there's a wizard character, which, like, I don't know, I think it was ambiguous as to whether it was Gandalf or not, but I think maybe it is. I don't know if they're still playing. It was a bit like, I can include this as well as the Wheel of Time. Another fantasy, this is the 3 high fantasy series that I'm sort of, I don't know, I'll just talk about them. So, Wheel of Time, I don't even know what they're up to. I think I've watched a couple of them. Maybe I've watched season 2. That might be another one to catch up over Christmas, but, oh god, where do I even start with Wheel of Time? Wheel of Time is massive. It's like 13, 14 books long. It was kind of like, before Brandon Sanderson was the king of sort of modern day epic fantasy, it was like the high watermark for epic fantasy. The whole premise of, how can I say this is what would make me want to read it or watch it, is like, the Wheel of Time is a spin on the idea of the chosen one. You know, it's the classic farm boy finds out he's the chosen one, but then the reason it takes 13 books is because it's not so simple to unite everybody in the world to fight against the common enemy. Even if the common enemy is the obviously evil Dark Lord Sauron kind of figure, people still can't get over their self-interest, and, like, you know, he's got to unite all the lords and all the kings, and they're all busy trying to get merchant tariffs down, and they're busy playing their little game of houses and scheming, and that's the kind of setup of the Wheel of Time, is like, how how much of a fucking ball ache it would be. Like, imagine if you were on Earth and you suddenly found out you're the chosen one. And you're like, okay, there's some evil monster living in the center of the Earth. How the hell are you going to convince Trump, Putin, all these like megalomaniac leaders to like believe you, first of all, and then also give up their own interests to cobble together to fight the Dark Lord? Like, that's the way I would sell it to someone like me as to whether or not you should check out the Wheel of Time. It also has a fantastic magic system. It has one of the best magic systems out there. Okay, the High Fantasy 3. Let's just summarize that. So, House of Dragon, liked Season 1, watched Season 2, will probably watch Season 3. Rings of Power, liked Season 1, haven't watched Season 2, might watch Season 2 at some point. Okay, and as for Wheel of Time, I just googled it. I have seen Season 2. I don't know if they got a Season 3 coming out. It's tough. I enjoyed the books a lot of The Wheel of Time, so that's why I didn't remember if I'd seen Season 2 or not, because I've kind of read it, so I know what happens, but I didn't know if I'd actually seen it. But when I was reading the synopsises, yes, I have actually watched it, and I think it's worth watching. I know Season 2 was a lot better than Season 1, I think, and yeah, I'll probably watch Season 3 as well. So when that comes out, or if it comes out, I will watch that. Okay, that was a massive chunk. We're going to move on. Oh god, I'm only like... We're getting there. We're almost to the end of the list. This is going to be a long boy. Succession. TV series Succession. So another one I could throw on there is Peep Show, which is like my all-time favorite sitcom. I love David Mitchell. I love Robert Webb. I've been following them for ages. And Peep Show is my all-time favorite sitcom. That's the thing that I watch when I have nothing else to watch and I just want to watch something. And yeah, Peep Show, if you've never seen it, watch that show and you will understand me a lot better. But Succession was written by one of the writers of Peep Show. And Succession's another one of those ones that actually, for most of it, I thought I wasn't enjoying Succession. The gist of the show is like Logan Roy is somewhere between a Vince McMahon, a Walt Disney, and then I don't know if there's a founder of like Fox News, or if it's one person or if it's a family, but let's assume it's one person. He owns this company called Waystar Royco, I think that's what they're called, and it is a big media conglomerate. They own theme parks. That's kind of where the Disney thing comes in. They own a massive amount of news stations. They're like a news, media company. ATN is their flagship news program, and it's a right-wing news thing like Fox News. And then the Vince McMahon thing is because I have to assume some of the inspiration has been taken from Vince McMahon here, because Logan Roy definitely seems to have come from a very abusive background, and Vince McMahon often talked about how he wanted to kill his... he said something to the effect of, it was a shame he died before I was able to kill him, about it was either his father or his stepfather, I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, the whole thing, it's very The Godfather as well. So Logan is the CEO or whatever the top, I don't know, business of Waystar Royco. He has 4 children. The eldest son is called Connor Roy, who is a bit of an airhead, a bit of a putz. He doesn't really have anything to do with running the business. He seems to be happy just sort of like being rich, and he's in this weird sort of creepy relationship with a woman who was like an escort, I think, but he's sort of I think it's almost like a sugar daddy sort of thing where he thinks they're in a real relationship and she's kind of like, I don't know, she's sort of going along with it because she doesn't really have any other options. I don't know, that relationship made me feel not good. But so he's not really in the picture. Then there is Kendall Roy, who's the second eldest. He is the closest to like a Michael Corleone. He is, I think, maybe like acting CEO or something at the start. Then there is his younger brother, which is Roman Roy, who is played by Macaulay Culkin's brother, Kieran Culkin. And he is a real sort of loose unit. Really doesn't seem to understand that. I mean, it's that whole are there consequences for rich people kind of thing. He's just kind of an asshole, I guess. He's real he's funny. He's fast-talking. He does seem to be competent in business, but also he's unpredictable, and he has really weird like mummy issues kind of thing. Like he has an element of him is the weird sort of sexual hang-ups that he has. And then the last sibling is Shiv. She is pretty competent and pretty like ruthless, but I think Shiv's flaw, because all the siblings have a kind of flaw built in them, and I think they all sort of inherited something from their father. It's very Godfather. Like, there's an analysis of the Godfather that's like, Don Corleone has 3 aspects that make him successful. He has the love for his family, he has ruthlessness, and he has cunning. The eldest son, Sonny, he inherited the ruthlessness and the love for his family, but he didn't inherit the cunning. Michael inherited the ruthlessness and the cunning, but didn't inherit the love for his family. And then Fredo inherited cunning and love for his family, but no ruthlessness. That's kind of, so all of the siblings are kind of missing something. And I think that's kind of what they were going through with Logan Roy here, where Logan is cunning, ruthless, and maybe like charismatic, I guess would be his third element. And so it's like, of the siblings, Kendall is relatively competent, but he's not ruthless, and he's like negative charisma. He's really awkward, and he wants people to like him, and he wants people to think he's cool, but he's not. I think Shiv is ruthless and charismatic to an extent, but I think her flaw is often that she thinks she's smarter than she is. I think that was the way it was written. And then Roman is charismatic and ruthless, but he's not that cunning. So you can see they're all kind of missing something that their father has. And so the whole aspect of the show is that the father doesn't really know which one of them he wants to take it over. He also doesn't really think he wants to step aside. And so the show is kind of them all vying for being the one who takes over the company, and whether that's through convincing the father to let them be the one, or they do like a vote of no confidence. They try to do a hostile takeover. Like, there's all these different businessy things they try to do to get to the top of Waystar Royco. It's basically like a Shakespearean drama. It's very dramatic, and the thing, I wasn't sure if I was enjoying it because none of the characters are likable. I really didn't like any of the characters, but I don't think they're supposed to be. I think they're supposed to be all kind of broken in their own way. So yeah, really well written, really well made, really well acted. It is great, and I definitely think it's one of those shows, a bit like The Wire or something, that people will you sort of have to watch it just because it's been a little bit of a cultural touchstone at times. Speaking of Shakespeare, this is all leading quite nicely into each other. I haven't done this on purpose, but it's all nice. So Shakespeare, I'm currently in the process of recording a series of podcasts where I take Shakespearean actors and they take me through Romeo and Juliet line by line and literally explain to me every single thing that the characters are saying, because I really get stuck on the dialogue and not really knowing what the characters are actually saying. So that'll be dropping in 2025. I don't quite know when. At the time of this recording, I'm not even halfway. I'm like maybe a third of the way through. So I want to get this one finished before I drop it. So yeah, just watch this space. I might release one of them as a taster. I'm not quite sure. Just subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. Harry Dresden. This is one that I've been reading lately. It is a sort of urban fantasy magic detective book. I am really enjoying it, actually. Something about it, so I can sort of group this with the next one on my list is Reacher. I really like the Reacher books, but I think I've finished reading all of the Reacher books that are sort of the the quote unquote good ones, or the best ones in the series, because you can read them out of order. They're all just, Reacher doesn't really age. He's sort of in this perpetual kind of late 90s, early 2000s time period when it comes to technology.
And that's actually something I really like about the Reacher books, is like, man, things were just so simple before we had phones. And there's something about this magical early 2000s time period where a crime novel, I mean, I'm sure it's a nightmare trying to write a crime novel now, or a mystery novel when people are walking around with literally all the information
that humanity's ever had in their pocket. But yeah, no, the Reacher books, they're just a comforting read. I've often talked about how I'm one of those people that the fantasy of being able to just drop everything and wander the earth like Reacher is an appealing one to me. You know, Reacher doesn't have a mortgage. He doesn't have other people that he has to consider in his life. He basically just gets to go where he wants, when he wants. It's the classic knight errant, the man with no name. He wanders into town. Baddies are doing bad things. Reacher gets involved, even though he consistently says he doesn't want to get involved. And then he wanders off into the sunset at the end. They're just, you know, it's a classic storytelling formula. And yeah, I don't know, I really like them. Dresden, on the other hand, is similar. Dresden is a mystery series. And actually, now that I notice, Dresden has a similar method for keeping the technology light. They say that technology doesn't really tend to cooperate around wizards. They have a sort of force field or an aura or something which causes electronics to short out and everything like that around them. So I imagine, independent of what time the Reacher series is, the Dresden series are being released, I imagine it'll be very low tech. And yeah, so Dresden, he is I think he's maybe in his early 20s in the first one, but he does actually age as the series goes on, and he's a wizard who works as a sort of detective in Chicago. He's kind of on retainer for the Chicago PD. They call him whenever there's something they think might be magical for him to sort of track down and figure out. And I think it's the mysteries that I'll give you a taste. So the first book, he gets brought in because there was a spell that someone had cast that made like the hearts or something get ripped out of this couple that were, you know, in the middle of a and you know, the mystery in that book was Reacher was trying to figure out who would have the power, the raw power to cast a spell like that, but also the precision of being able to cast it from far away, because obviously the person was not in the room when the spell was cast. And each follow-up book has different mysteries. I'm really struggling to read through one of them that gets into like the fae and fairies and stuff like that. The first few were very grounded, with light references to the fae and fairies. He has like a fairy godmother who sort of owned his soul or something, and I was like, all right, yeah. And this next book has been it's not one that I can skip because it feels like they're setting up a very major force of nature in the world of Harry Dresden. It's the summer court and the winter court, these two sort of yin and yang of fairies, where each court has a queen, a mother, and a daughter. It's like queen of winter, mother of winter, daughter of winter, whatever it is. And they're in conflict in this particular book. And it's just been so, like, I don't really jive with the fairy stuff. I think it's fine. Like, if you like it, it's cool, and I can sort of get through it, but I much preferred the sort of real life crime, mafia, that sort of, you know, vampire. There's a book about vampires. So I'm really, really struggling to get through this one, but I know I can't skip it because I sense that a lot of the characters and the conflict introduced is probably going to be a major thing going forward. The books are really smutty as well. That's another thing. If I understand, ladies these days, thanks to Book Talk, have gotten into these sort of, what is it, the Court of Thorn and Roses. Apparently it's like a horny fairy book or something. I haven't read it, but if you've finished all the ones you know of, and what I've described to you of Dresden sounds up your alley, there is quite a lot. You know, it's like that fade to black sort of sex scene thing, but it's very smutty. So if that's a selling point for you, then I think you'll be very happy reading the Dresden series. Okay, next on the list, Shogun, a TV series set in Japan. It is loosely based on a book called Shogun, which was, I think, from the 70s or something. I don't know if I need to recommend this as such because it was pretty big. I think I did hear a lot of people saying, "Are you watching Shogun?" I I don't know, I've seen so many of those, like, white guy goes to Asia and somehow, what are they called, like white savior movies or something, and this book, or this series feels a little bit like that. The main guy is white, and he very quickly sort of rises the ranks of this Lord Toranaga. I think the initial political intrigue is interesting. The idea is that the Shogun has died. Shogun is like the king or the warlord of Japan, and you need a consensus among his, what are they, his lords, his sub-lords or whatever they are, as to who's going to be the next Shogun. And there is a sort of a divide where 3 of them have sort of cobbled up, and then the other 3 are sort of undecided, and they're trying to, they're trying to get a consensus. And you could argue that the 3 that have cobbled up are sort of the baddies, I guess. But at the same time, I don't know. It's another one of those shows where I didn't really like any. Some of the characters are cool, but none of them really stuck out to me as like, that's my guy. I think in terms of tone, it's beautifully done. Like the costumes and the villages and the way they do the languages. Like I think the 2 languages they speak are Portuguese and Japanese, and there are certain characters who can speak a little bit of Japanese or a little bit of Portuguese, so they're kind of speaking in like broken English or broken Japanese. I think they did the languages really, really well, and the fact that communication was such an issue for them back then, like. There's a scene where a bunch of the main guys get captured, and they get brought to the sort of local lord, and the local lord finds a local Japanese dude who's a Christian who can barely speak English, but they're like, it's good enough, you translate for this. And so, yeah, the communication aspect, they've nailed it. It's really, really well done. The fight scenes are cool. There's some cool naval battles, cannons firing. That's all really sweet. It's really well done. But it was one of those shows where I just felt like, God, it's taking forever for anything to happen. Like, I don't know how many episodes I'm in, and I feel like nothing has happened yet. So, I don't know, I might finish it, but if you like sort of period pieces that are very well done, and it's, slow burn is the big thing that everybody likes these days, so, yeah, check it out. Like, I'll probably finish it very slowly, but, I've just got so many things that I'm into at the moment that I can't, okay, do I watch another episode of Shogun, or do I watch another episode of this show that I'm actually really enjoying? So yeah, it's slow progress. The Dark Tower series, I've been reading the novels of that. God, I don't have time. We're an hour and 10 minutes in already. Good God. Stephen King, you know how it is. He does good works. The Dark Tower is his big sort of opus series. And what fascinates me so much is there's actually a website where you can look up how all of Stephen King's works interconnect with each other, and like what references to different books are in other books. And like the Dark Tower is kind of his, it's like the pillar at the center of his universe where like stuff from his other books shows up in the Dark Tower. It's actually crazy how many authors had been doing multiverse stuff before Marvel Marvel sort of kicked that door wide open, and now multiverse is the thing. Funnily enough as well, I actually did a fringe comedy show called Multiverse, like right around the time that multiverses were kicking off, so I was a little bit ahead of the curve there as well. Next one on the list is called The Grey Bastards. This one I didn't read much of, but I felt like I'd recommend it anyway because it was an intersection of 2 interests that I have. People say it is like, imagine Sons of Anarchy, except it's in a fantasy world where the main characters, instead of riding Harleys, they are hog riders. They're orcs, and they ride hogs around. I didn't get very far into it. It just wasn't doing it for me, but if that kind of thing sounds like a bit of you, then check it out. Next one on the list is Survivor Season 1. So if you follow my friend Henry Hickman's Survivor on YouTube, you would have seen me pop up in a video of his a while back where they had me watch the first season of Survivor with them, and we kind of gave our predictions and what we thought of the series and everything. And I've not been someone that's followed Survivor at all. I've been vaguely aware of it in the zeitgeist, and obviously hanging around with Henry, you do hear quite a bit of the old Survivor talk. And my first experience of watching it, yeah, I think I enjoyed it. For me, I guess this is going to sound weird, but if Henry's listening, I don't think he is, so don't don't fuck on me. But like, for me, the episodes are a bit long, and I'm a bit like this with wrestling as well. Sometimes I don't need to sit down and watch the entire match. I just want to know what's happening in the story. It's kind of key moments from throughout the match. What happened before and after the match, the entrances, the promos, that kind of thing. I'm not, and I think this is why I've sort of stopped watching as much AEW as I have. Because when AEW started up, and a lot of wrestlers went to AEW that had been in the WWE, felt like the whole company had one cohesive story. But lately, they're doing a cohesive. I shouldn't say this exactly because they are trying to do a big cohesive story with the whole roster. But a lot of the type of wrestling that I don't really get is what people would call like spot monkey wrestling, where it's just a bunch of athleticism and fancy moves and cool stuff, which is cool to see. But I kind of need like the storyline. I need like the emotional stakes to really care about who wins the match. Like, there's some cool stuff. Like, there was some cool spots between like Ricochet and Logan Paul in WWE this year that I'd seen. But like, when they announce these matches that is like, you know, really athletic, like Ricochet versus Will Ospreay are these matches that everyone looks at, it's going to be a fucking good match, and it's just a bunch of moves, sort of, they're athletic as fuck, and they could do things that I could never even dream of doing in the ring. But like, yeah, that type of wrestling doesn't really appeal to me, and so I'm a bit like that with Survivor, where I would be happy just seeing like of each episode, just seeing like the Cliff's Notes of it, like, okay, who got into some shit, who won the challenge, who got voted off, and then I would be happy watching that in a sort of like 15 to 20 minute format. I think for me, and I'm sure if you like Survivor, it's just the best thing, getting to watch them out on the island and building the shelter and interacting with each other. And they always say that Survivor is a great social experiment, but I don't know. I just, for some reason, I want to see progress. I'm like, okay, what's happening next? That seems to be the thing that really interests me about Survivor, is just learning who won, who did this, who got eliminated, was there any beef, and then cool, let's go on to the next episode. So yeah, you can get along to Henry Hickman's Survivor on YouTube and see a sort of mini podcast we did, me and Lisa, who was a friend of ours, who actually won the latest season of New Zealand Survivor, I think 2016 or 18 or something. It was pretty recently. And yeah, you can check that out and see how I responded to it. Okay, Whiplash is one that I put off seeing for ages because I got it mixed up. I was thinking of Whip It, which is a movie about roller derby, not to be confused with Whip It, the movie about a dog. Haha, roll on snare. Cracked me up. But yeah, Whip It is God, I'm getting confused now. Whiplash is a movie about a kid who wants to be a jazz drummer in a big band jazz band, and the incredibly abusive treatment he gets from J.K. Simmons' character, who's his kind of conductor/teacher. It's received all sorts of critical acclaim, amazing script, really well done. J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller are like just great in it. They're so good together. I won't say too much more about it because I've actually got another episode coming out where I discussed this movie with Jeff Wilson, who we broke down the menu with. So yeah, keep your eye out for breaking down Whiplash. Okay, the final one, the last one on my list, is a series called From, and it's from 2022. It's from the same producers as the show Lost, and the basic setup is people get stuck in this sort of magic, I believe it's magic, but I don't know, it's a magic town where they can't leave, and at night these monsters come out that look like people, but then when they attack you, they sort of show their true form, and they've got, big teeth and long fingernails, and they're all scary and, all that sort of thing. And the townsfolk, the people online call it Fromville, which I think is kind of a dumb name, but, the town
they have these talismans that you can hang them next to your door, and as long as the space is enclosed, it keeps the monsters out, because otherwise the monsters can just break through walls and jump through windows and grab you, and they get you. And there's a lot of theories about what's going on. Like, is it a science experiment? Are they in a simulation? Is it a magic thing? Is this a magic place? Are they in the real world? It's, a lot of questions being answered. I'm probably actually just about to watch the final episode of season 3 tonight when I get back from the gig. I'm really looking forward to that. Much like Lost, it asks a lot of questions, and it has this really creative kind of world. The world building is great. The characters are so good as well. The main character is called Boyd, and he is played by the same guy who played Walt's dad. I think he was called Michael in Lost. And oh man, he's so good in this. He's the sheriff, and he's like a former Marine or something in the army. And he just has this level of being done with everything that's just so relatable. And yeah, Boyd, he's kind of he's one of the only things that's keeping people together. He's sort of he walks around the town with a bell, ringing the bell to make sure everyone gets inside at night. And he's kind of the leader. He's like the mayor, I guess, I think is kind of what he is. And it's really, really creepy. I binged it in about a week or something, which was a mistake because I gave myself such nightmares. I was lying in bed one night and I rolled over, and then all of a sudden I thought I saw this black shape come leaping at me, sort of from behind where my laundry hamper was. I thought it was a dog or something leaping at me, and I got a hell of a fright. It was like when when you're about to fall asleep and your leg kind of jerks or whatever. It was that kind of feeling. I was, ooh, and I think I screamed really loud actually. It's really surprised that my flatmate didn't hear me waking up with the scream. But yeah, it's really scary. It does such a good job of setting up a lot of questions in the beginning. We're approaching season 3 now, so I'm kind of looking at it all right, guys, you need to start giving us some answers now, because I'm kind of we've watched 3 seasons of this, and we need to start seeing some what the hell is going on, because apparently they've planned 5 seasons, and it just got announced the other day that they've been renewed for season 4. So we'll at least get 4, and I'm hoping that we start to get some answers soon. And oh God, I'm just hoping they don't fumble it like the ending of Lost. I think this show in a way feels maybe like they're trying to redo a little bit of Lost, because I have some theories about it sort of being like a purgatory kind of. Maybe they're being there so that they can be punished, or maybe they did something in life that caused them to be there, or maybe it's a kind of they need to mentally progress to a certain point to escape, that sort of vibe, which I think Lost was doing, but then I don't know. I think they also Lost, they were the island was actually a real place and they were moving it around in time. So I don't know, I lost. Roll on snare, but I really lost. I fell off. I don't even think I finished Lost. I was watching. It was crazy as well, because for years I was in middle school I was in high school. Sorry, when Lost was airing, and it would be the show that every whatever it was Thursday or morning you'd come. Oh, did you see the new episode of Lost last night? So yeah, it was a big show, but I don't even think I finished it. It just went on for too long, I think. I think it was one of those shows that was a bit of a victim of its own success. It had to, maybe if they'd just done 4 seasons, the show they would have wrapped it up nicely in a bow. So I'm hoping that they've learned from that, and they're going to make From very compact, and it's going to have a satisfying arc. I hope they know how it's going to end. Okay, we made it. Oh my goodness. There was so much talking. I forgot how draining solo podcasts can be. So thank you for listening. I hope you're going to check out some of these shows, movies, books, etc. that I've recommended. All of the titles in order are going to be in the show notes, so go and check out all of those. Of course, as well, you can check out my comedy special, Panic at the Buffet, on my YouTube channel at Taylor Ruddle Comedy, as well as all of my other social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're going to check out some of these things, and head along to the Reddit r/Ruddle Me This. I'm going to make a thread when this episode goes live for recommendations, and I will talk to you next time. Ruddler out. Thank you for listening to Ruddle Me This. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddle her out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.
Hey Ruddlers, I joined a group of podcasters that we are calling the Trailer Alliance, a group of podcasters that share each other's trailers at the end of the episodes and generally support each other. So at the end of each episode for the next few weeks, I'm going to be playing a trailer of one of the members of the Trailer Alliance. And here's one of them now. I hope you like it.
Are you struggling with a lack of access to captivating entertainment and media? Are you faced with constant judgment and ridicule from friends and family for your inability to respond appropriately to sensitive situations? If this sounds like you might be suffering from being emotionally dead inside. But it's not too late to make a change. One Nothing Podcast is a newly available treatment for being dead inside. Taken just once every 2 weeks, One Nothing could make a world of difference. By combining carefully measured dark humor to the amazing original formula of grisly fatalities, One Nothing Podcast has successfully entertained thousands of people suffering from death inside. And with access across all podcast platforms, treatment has never been more readily available. But don't trust my word. Here's some real-world testimonials from a few of our listeners currently undergoing treatment.
From consistent doses of One Nothing Podcast, my posture has greatly improved due to being kept on the edge of my seat.
The One Nothing Podcast comes on, everybody be like, shut the f*** up. I be quiet, but when the episode's over, I be talking again.
Oh my gosh, buddy. I used to be on so many medications for blood pressure, and then I listened to One Nothing Podcast's episode on Kitty Genovese, moved into an apartment on my own, and haven't needed it since. That one really got my blood pumping.
You know, listening to One Nothing Podcast, I'm not constipated anymore. I'm just full of shit.
So what's stopping you from great entertainment?
One Nothing Podcast is not intended for all audiences. Listeners under 18 years of age should obtain permission from your parent or guardian before downloading. Tell your therapist if you're predisposed to whining, complaining, reading podcasts poorly, being overall combative, or being easily offended, as One Nothing Podcast might not be right for you.
So stop letting great content pass you by. Talk to your therapist today to see if One Nothing Podcast is right for you.